Welcome back, my dear students. So once again I am before you to present one more chapter, and this time it's a chapter from your supplementary book, The Address Fiction 2 Part 1. In Part 1 I will introduce the writer and I will tell you the summary also. So are you ready? The Address by Marga Minko. Okay. About the author. Marga Minko, daughter of Sarah Minko, was born on 31st March 1920. She was a Dutch journalist and writer. Her real surname was Menko, M-E-N-C-O, but because of an official accident, it switched the first vowel. In 1957, she published her first book, Hate Better Crude, in which a nameless character goes through war experiences reminiscent of the author. By the end of this chapter, you shall be able to understand, interpret, evaluate, and respond to the features of the chapter, critically appreciate the writer's style of writing, and understand the effectiveness of the style of narration. So I hope you are ready. So you note down, your notebook should be ready. Note down the summary. I have written something in a very short way that you can note down for your convenience, but apart from that, I would like to share something else also. Here in this story, the narrator decides to visit the address that was given to her by her mother, where all her family precious possessions were kept safely by Mrs. Darling. The first time when the narrator visited the address, Mrs. Darling behaved in the most absurd manner. She refused to recognize the narrator and did not let her enter the house. So the narrator returns empty-handed. The narrator is reminded of her mother, Mrs. S., who had given the address to her years ago, when in spite of war they were living in Holland, and she saw Mrs. Darling, who was introduced to her as an old acquaintance of her mother. The narrator noticed many precious items missing from her house. Then Mrs. S. told her that Mrs. Darling was helping her by taking her tablecloth, silver cutlery, antique plates, large wooden crockery to her house to keep in safe custody, in case they had to leave the house suddenly. The narrator decided to revisit the house of Mrs. Darling as she felt the urge to see all her mother's belongings. She wanted to touch them, feel them, and remember them. On her second visit to 46 Marconi Street, she could get entry into the house. As Mrs. Darling's 15 years old daughter opened the door, her mother was not at home. The girl led her to the living room where, to the narrator's dismay, things belongings to her mother's were arranged in a very bad manner. Mrs. Darling's daughter innocently told the narrator that they were using all the antique plates, crockery, and cutlery. The narrator took an impulsive decision to leave everything behind, as the precious objects owned by her mother had lost their value. Also, these objects associated with the mother were now in strange surroundings. The narrator decided to forget her past, as it brought back bitter memories. Her mother was no more there to revive the pleasant memories. The narrator walked out of Mrs. Darling's house, deciding that she would never come back to this house to see or take her family's possessions, as she had no place to keep all of it. So this is the summary in detail, and in short I have written here. before you. This story is a touching account of a girl who goes in search of her mother's belongings after the Second World War in Holland. But even after finding what she so much wanted to touch, to see, to feel, and remember, she leaves everything behind, as it could not bring her dead mother back. She decides to move on and live with only memories of the former times. The address that held so much importance till she visited that place lost its value, and the girl realized that it could get her nothing but pain. So, my dear students, I hope you have understood the chapter, but this is not everything. So, you'll have to read the chapter yourself line by line. In case of any trouble, you can approach me, but because it is a chapter of supplementary book, so reading by you will be appreciated. Just after the completion of reading of the chapter, when you will be able to understand and you'll be able to answer the questions, then means tomorrow you will get the second part of the same chapter, that is question and answer. So read the chapter, enjoy the beauty of literature, and this story is written in a very different context. It's not only about one family or about one character. This is telling about the scenario of those times in which after the war what happens. Post war incidents are mentioned in this chapter. The narrator has gone through much hardships. First, her mother has died. Then she also says, but gradually everything became more normal again. Bread was getting to be a lighter color. There was a bed you could sleep in, unthreatened, a room with a view you were more used to glancing at each day. So this implies that during the war they were forced to eat bread which was black. They were always afraid of being caught and sent to a concentration camp like other Jews, and they could not even look out of the window as it was covered with blackout paper. She also says near the end, what should I have done with them in a small rented room where the shreds of blackout paper still hung along the windows, and no more than a handful of cutlery fitted in the narrow table drawer. This means that even after the war, she is living almost in poverty in the small room in which she sheltered during the war, the windows of which were having blackout paper still remaining. Thus, she has suffered and is still suffering much hardships besides being deprived of her rightful positions by Mrs. Darling. So this is all for today, and in our next video the question answers will be discussed. But before that, you must read the chapter carefully line by line. So thank you very much. This was all from my side, and now it is your turn. Thank you. Bye bye.